going to be a book review and sort of a topic discussion. I finished reading this book last night and I knew instantly that I wanted to do a video on this. As I was reading this book, I knew it was life-changing. I knew that it would stick with me for the rest of my life, and I knew it was a book that I would forever sort of hold a place within my heart, I guess. So you've either stumbled across this video because you're searching for reviews on this book, or you know, you just watch my videos, or you're looking for a new book to read. And yes, I hope you enjoy this video. I'll try not to give spoilers away as much as I can, but I will be like discussing some little elements of the book. So from the title, you know what the book is. This is Sarah's Key, and this is written by Tatiana de Rosnay. Now, I'd never heard of this author or this book. I've actually found out that it's been a film about 10 years ago. I didn't know any of that. I think I picked this up when we were at the airport, one of our earlier trips this year, I mean, I don't know if you can tell from the front cover, but you can tell that it is Holocaust based, and that is one of the topics that I am most interested in reading about. It's a weird thing for some people. They can't understand why I am so engrossed in this type of book, considering it's all very dark and tragic, and you know, a lot of awful stuff happened. But for me, not only do I have a personal connection to it, but I feel it's really important to keep our eyes open to this sort of thing, to not shy away from it, and this book is prime example of that. So I will read the back of the book and I will tell you a little bit more about it. So it says, Paris, July 1942. Sarah, a 10-year-old Jewish girl, is arrested with her family and sent to the Vel d'Hiv. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Not great on my French, so just bear with me on that one. But not before she locks her younger brother in a cupboard in the family's apartment, promising to come back for him as soon as she can. And then it goes, on the 60th anniversary of the Vel d'Hiv roundup, journalist Julia Jarmond is asked to write an article about the infamous day in 1942 when French police rounded up thousands of Jewish men, women and children in order to send them to concentration camps. Through her investigation, she stumbles onto the trail of a long-hidden family secret that connects her to Sarah. Sarah's Key is a poignant story of two families forever linked and haunted by one of the darkest days in France's past. In this emotionally intense and brilliant subtle novel, Tatiana de Rosnay reveals the guilt brought on by the revolution, of long-buried secrets, and the damage that the truth can inflict when it finally becomes unravelled. So this book is split kind of in two. It flips back and forth between two characters. This book is fictional, the characters in it are fictional, but it is based upon true events, and a lot of the things that happen in the book were real things that happened back in 1942. And I have to say, even though this is fictional, I was so engrossed in it. I felt like the characters were real. I felt like they were jumping right off the page. Like, I was totally invested in this book. Yeah, so you've got on one hand Sarah, who is a 10-year-old girl. She lives in Paris in 1942, and one day there is a knock on her door and a French policeman tells her and her mother, and subsequently her father, that they have to leave their apartment, that they are taking them away. They don't really know much more than that. Obviously Sarah is very confused, but she knows that they're obviously in some sort of danger or trouble, so she decides to hide her younger brother. He is like 4 or 5, I believe. She decides to hide him in this secret cupboard that they've got in their bedroom. She locks him in the cupboard and promises him, you know, I'm going to be back for you soon, not realising that it's going to be a lot longer than she thinks. And then on the other hand, you have Julia, who is a middle-aged woman. She's 40, so she's not quite middle-aged, but she is an American journalist who lives in France. She's married to a French man, and they've got a child together, and she is given the task by her newspaper to write an article about the 60th anniversary of the Vel d'Hiv. She has never heard about it before, and she obviously starts delving into what it's about. So this book touched on a subject that I knew nothing about. I studied GCSE history at school. I have read, you know, numerous books surrounding World War II and the Holocaust from different perspectives, different areas, different countries, all that sort of thing. But I had never heard of the Vel d'Hiv, and considering that it's in France, it's literally a stone's throw away in Paris. It was really shocking for me, and I immediately had to put the book down like a couple chapters in and research what this was about. I will try and leave as much like information and links down below as I can if you want to read more, but the gist of it is that in fact, let me get the Wikipedia page up because I don't want to sort of misquote numbers and things like that. And what's really poignant is this, like, I'm recording this I think on the 20th of July. This happened on I think the 16th and 17th of July back in 1942, so it's very poignant for this time of year, and it's a complete coincidence that I picked it up at this time. So the Velodrome de Hivre is it was an indoor bicycle racing track or a stadium that was not far from the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and you know, it was used for all sorts of sports. And then in 1942, French police, acting under order from the German authorities, used the velodrome to hold thousands of Jews and other victims in a mass arrest. They were held at the velodrome before they were moved to concentration camps in the Parisian suburbs at Drancy. I think there was a couple other little suburb camps before they were then taken to Auschwitz. So as Julia starts to investigate more about this event, she starts asking, you know, her French friends, her in-laws, her husband, if they've ever heard of the Vel d'Hiv, and some of them are like, yeah, we sort of know roughly about it. Some of them thought it happened, you know, in a different country. Some of them had never heard of it before. And some of them were like, yeah, we sort of know about it, but it was in the past. A lot of people have forgotten, that sort of thing. And this is quite a key thing that happens throughout the book, is a lot of people have either forgotten, or they have chosen to forget, or they simply just weren't taught about it and they don't really know much about it, and they're sort of led to believe that it happened in a faraway place, as opposed to, you know, right around the corner from a building or a school they went to, that sort of thing. And Julia finds out that her husband's family had they had moved into an apartment that was once occupied by Jewish people who had moved out or forced out on that day in July. And now Julia is intent on finding out who that family was, what happened to them, and how her in-laws came about moving into that apartment. So it's sort of, she's got this professional side of her trying to find out for the newspaper, getting the facts and things, but she's also got this personal drive and she wants to meet people and find out more about this family. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil some of the big events in the book. For me, some of the events were, I could sort of predict them. Obviously, you know from the back of the book that somehow Julia and Sarah are connected, and it turns out, I mean, you can sort of allude to it fairly early on in the book, that it was Sarah's family who owned the apartment, and then it was Sarah's husband's grandparents or great-grandparents, I believe, that moved into that apartment shortly after they left. And as she's going to meet all these different people, you know, she goes to a restaurant, she asks the waiter, I mean, this restaurant is literally 5 minutes from where, like, the Drancy camp was, and he was like, yeah, I've heard about it, no one really comes to visit it that much, except for, you know, around Memorial time. You know, people tend not to talk about it, it's quite like a shushed topic, and this really surprises her. And I mean, it's quite reflective of today. I think there's still a lot of people that try to keep it in the past and think, you know, it's happened in the past, why do we need to bring it up again? But there's that thing of, if it is forgotten, then events will repeat themselves. And I know on a personal level that one of my most viewed videos is a book on the, it was years ago, like maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and it was about my top 5 books that are based around the Holocaust. And I have had numerous comments that I have had to block or delete, or I simply just leave them there because other people have already criticised their comments, saying things like the Holocaust isn't real, you know, this is all fiction. I've had comments saying like everything about like Anne Frank isn't true, like she deserved to go and be gassed, like some really like awful comments that I just simply delete or block, or you know, someone's beaten me to it and said like these people are idiots. Yeah, so the fact that that still goes on shows that we still need to bring light to these people. We still need to remember these people and make not only the survivors' voices heard, but also the voices heard of those that went to the concentration camps. And you know, there's one scene in this where Julia's sat at a table with two of her really good friends and one of their friend, and her two good friends are pretty like awkward when she brings up the topic about Veldehive. You know, they're French, they sort of think that she shouldn't really be writing this article, she should just leave it in the past. They don't really know what to say, what's acceptable to say, because it's so close to home. At the end of the day, it was the French police that put these people in the camps and into the velodrome. Yes, they were acting on German orders, but at the end of the day, it was friends, it was family, it was neighbours that were putting people into these camps. But it's that thing of, you don't, at the time you didn't know who was safe, you didn't know who to trust, and a lot of people at the time were turned in by like the concierges that lived in their building, or you know, not like the security that lived at the bottom, but you know what I mean, like the door staff, that kind of thing. Throwing it back to Sarah, obviously it is such a traumatic story, and I know that this particular story is fiction, but it really emulates things that did happen to kids, you know. The whole bit with her brother being locked in a cupboard is tragic enough, but you know, she's split away from her family and her parents, and her and thousands of other children had to, you know, go on without their parents. Some of them weren't old enough to talk or really like fend for themselves, and some of the older children were forced to grow up and sort of look after them and help comfort them, even though they shouldn't have been experiencing that themselves and taking on that role. A lot of children, you know, missed out on being a child and had to grow up extremely quickly. So one of the places that this book mentions is the internment camp Drancy, which is about an hour away from Paris. It still stands today in a slightly different usage, shall we say. I will insert some pictures. I'm gonna make my best effort on this video to definitely include them today. But back in the day, obviously it was an internment camp, and it was supposed to hold like only about 700 people, but it ended up holding 10 times more than that, I believe. And like I said, over 67,000 parents and children and adults were sent to Drancy and then moved on to Auschwitz, and very little of them survived. I believe when they got to Auschwitz, most of them just went to the gas chambers, and you know, that is the sad truth of it. And today you'll see in the picture that it has actually, I know some of it was torn down, but most of the structure still stands and is used today as French council housing, which I think is incredible. And it makes me wonder how many of the people living in that block really know what happened on that ground, in their comfortable bedrooms that they live in, and like food on their table every night, electricity, running water, if they really knew what had happened. There is a small memorial and I think a small museum at the site. There is actually one of the train cattle cars on site. But again, it's how many people know about it, and I think especially in France it was really I think they were probably very ashamed of their history there. I mean, I'm not French, so I can't speak for the French, but I know that it was sort of swept under a carpet for a very long time, and it wasn't till I think like around the year 2000, 2002 that, and like the 60th anniversary, that the French president actually, you know, said something and said, yes, at the end of the day, the French had a hand in all these people's deaths, and they were taking ownership of what they did and the atrocities that happened. I made a interesting poll on my Instagram, and I put, because obviously I put that I was reading this book, and I put a little bit about Drancy and what happened at the Vel d'Hiv. Said, you know, before now, have you ever heard of either of these events? And it was a staggering, I think it was like 92% said they hadn't. I think there was about 3 people, one including my husband, who said he thinks that they might have touched on it somewhat in school, or he had seen a video on it, a film on TV. But yeah, 92% of people hadn't heard of it. And, you know, before reading this book, I was one of them. And that's nothing to be personally ashamed about, because in a way that is, it's sort of our education system letting us down and society letting us down, I guess, and that's why we need to talk about this more. And there is still obviously a lot, I'm not claiming to be, you know, a historian on this. There are so many different individual events that happened, not just like in Europe, but, you know, across the world during World War II. And you know, it wasn't just the Jewish people, there were many different categories of people that were taken in. This book just shone a light on an event that I knew nothing about, and I was so invested in these characters. I loved both characters. I really felt empathy for both of them. Julia also is sort of having a marital breakdown in a sense. They lightly touch on miscarriage and being, you know, a 40-year-old woman trying to have another baby, and the consequences that come with that in her marriage. Also, you know, being an American woman in France, that has an impact on how she sees things and how people see her in a way. And yeah, and then it also touches on Sarah, and even though, you know, it's been a long time since I was 10 years old, you're seeing the events through her eyes. You're seeing what she sees and how she feels. She is so confused. Like, she knows that something, she's heard her parents whisper and like talk behind closed doors about something, but she doesn't quite know the full extent of it, hence, you know, locking her brother in the cupboard and thinking she'd be back maybe in like an hour or two. And like, there's so many questions that she's like rhetorically asking, because she just doesn't know, and she's like questioning why Jewish people are being targeted. So overall, you know, I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. It was a no-brainer. It was one of the books that makes you stay up and want to read right to the end. I really savoured each page, and like I was up well into the night last night finishing this book. And yeah, I would totally recommend it. If you have any interest in reading books about the Holocaust or the war, then definitely this would be a book for you to read. But even if it's not your usual typical thing, I would still recommend reading it, because, you know, it's an important event that not many people know about. But underneath that sort of factual element, there is 2 great characters in this book, and I know I've sort of talked more on the event side of it rather than this book, but only because I don't want to give too many spoilers away with what happens. But it is a story of Julia, you know, going on this journey, finding out more about her family, finding out more about Sarah's family, and, you know, what happened to her, what was the fate, and how what happened to her as a child impacted her for the rest of her life. So that was my review, my topic discussion on Sarah's Key. If you've read it or you've seen the film, let me know down below. I am hesitant to watch the film because I know it's going to be sad, not only because it is set in the time that it is and like the events that happen, but I know from the book what happens. And let me know if you've seen either, or if you've read the book, if you're thinking of reading the book. As always, I mean, if you've made it this far, you're probably somewhat interested in this book and not a hater. But, you know, just be nice in the comments. You know, I know everyone is allowed to have their say, their view on things. But if you've got any ridiculous comments that the Holocaust didn't exist and crap like that, that is not welcome on this platform, and I ask you to leave swiftly. So yeah, that was my review, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye guys.